Emily, who lives in an old farmhouse in a wooded area of North Carolina, made the decision to stay at home alone for one night because her family was going to the city for the weekend. The house was quiet and isolated, as if hidden in the forest, and this silence had always been a source of peace for him. But tonight, the silence would turn into an adventure full of fearful moments for him. On the first night, Emily decided to spend time in her bedroom reading a book. The moonlight was filtering through the windows of the room, and the silence of the house was peaceful. However, while reading a book, he suddenly felt a light breeze in the room. The breeze caused the curtain sitting in front of the window to move slightly. However, he could not see anything outside the window. On the second night, Emily tried to sleep in her bedroom again. But tonight, when he woke up, he had a strange dream. In his dream, an invisible presence was walking around inside his house. This presence was appearing in the corners of the room, but it was not possible for him to see what it was. The presence was quietly moving through the room. On the third night, as soon as Emily woke up, she heard a child laughing. However, he was alone in the house and had no idea of the source of such a sound. The sounds were coming from strange places inside the house, sometimes close to a room, sometimes from far away. On the fourth night, Emily decided to solve the mystery in the house. Inside the house, he explored every corner of it, studied historical documents, and learned about the local legends of the village. According to ancient legends, this farmhouse housed the soul of a lost child. On the fifth night, Emily accepted the silence in the house and managed to restore the soul of the lost child to peace. From this moment on, the silence in the house became peaceful and turned into a new beginning for Emily. The quiet and peace of the house was now opening the door to a new life for Emily. When his parents returned, he was waiting to share this experience with them and tell them about the true meaning of silence in the house. Sarah, who lives in a quiet village in Ohio, had to spend a weekend at home alone because her family was going out of town. The silence of the house and the peace of the village had always been a dream for him, but this weekend he would realize that dreams come true in a frightening way. The first night, Sarah tried to sleep in her bedroom, but she felt that something was missing in that silence that blocked her ears. Usually, the rustling of the village and the sounds of raindrops on the roof of the house would comfort her, but tonight she could not hear those sounds. It was as if the village had fallen into silence. On the second night, Sarah had a strange dream in her bedroom. In his dream, hundreds of black birds appeared blurry in the garden of his house. The birds were covered with feathers and flying around his house in incredible silence. Sarah noticed in her dream that the birds were not singing when they were looking towards her. They were just looking silently. On the third night, Sarah tried not to dream, but without success. In his dream, strange shadows were walking around inside his house. These shadows, as if they were silence itself. Sarah, wandering in her dream, felt that her house was beginning to disappear into the silence. On the fourth night, as soon as Sarah woke up, she decided to solve the mystery inside the house. He explored every corner of the house, studied old family albums, and learned the history of the village. There had been a silent disaster in the village's past, so the silence still affected the residents. On the fifth night, Sarah found out the reason for the sadness of silence. The silence of the village represented a tragedy that had happened in the past. Sarah accepted the silence with understanding and sadness, and from that day on, the silence became for her like a peaceful friend in the house. The quiet of the house and the peace of the village had now turned into a new beginning for Sarah. When his family returned home, having solved the meaning of silence and sadness, he was waiting to share this experience with them. Mark, who lives in an isolated cabin in the highlands of Colorado, had to stay at home alone for one night because his family was going to the city for the weekend. His cabin seemed to be buried in the pine forests, and this environment, dominated by silence, was a dream for him. But he did not know that tonight his dreams would turn into reality in a frightening way. On the first night, as Mark was sitting inside the hut, he noticed that the shadows were moving in a strange way. The shadows dancing on the walls and ceiling of the room were strange in the silence, but he could not understand why the shadows behaved in such a way. On the second night, Mark tried to relax in the bedroom, but when he woke up, he noticed that the atmosphere of his room had changed. Strange figures were appearing in every corner of his room. Figures were emerging from the shadows and moving around the room. But these figures were moving in silence, not saying a word. On the third night, Mark decided to solve the mystery in the house. He explored every corner of the house, studied old family albums, and learned the history of the village. It was written in the history of the village that it was considered sacred by the ancient natives of this area, and this hut had a special meaning. On the fourth night, Mark felt that he was getting closer to discovering the secret of the shadows. He thought that the figures were trying to tell him something, but it took more research to figure out what the figures wanted. On the fifth night, Mark managed to decipher the meaning of the shadows. These figures represented the spirits of the locals, and they wanted to help him. As a result of a sacred tragedy that happened in this land, the souls of these figures were still wandering in this hut. Mark was able to restore these souls to peace. Your hut was now full of peace. Shadows and figures were now quietly going on with their lives. Through this experience, Mark discovered the true beauty of silence and sacred meaning in the house. This silence was a new beginning for him,